We welcome our darshan for this Shabbat, Jessica's grandfather, and our longtime member, Ira Mishkind, today. Ira is a gracious, kind, and generous person. He has been our darshan at all three of his grandchildren's bar or bat mitzvahs at Adat Ariel, and it is a pleasure to be able to share the bima with him this morning.
Good morning, good Shabbos. I want to congratulate Jessica on a really magnificent job. She's a tough act to follow. I want to thank her for the opportunity to be the darshan this morning. I really enjoyed doing the research and writing this up. And last but not least, before I get into this week's portion, I want to make sure if I'm ever darshan again, that I send the rabbi my speech before we have the service. Any similarity between what I'm going to say and what the rabbi said last night and this morning is purely accidental. Okay. This week's portion is Shemot. It means names, and it deals with the commissioning of Moses. Last week's portion ended with the death of Joseph, who made the Israelites promise to take his bones with them when they would return to the land of Canaan. Joseph's faith in Israel's return to the promised land is summarized by his statement, "God will surely remember you," alluding to the great exodus of the descendants of Israel as promised to his great-grandfather Abraham. The portion is from the book of Exodus and begins 400 years after the end of Genesis, by recounting the fact that the descendants of Jacob flourished and multiplied in Egypt, and the land was filled with them. However, when a new Pharaoh arose in Egypt, he did not remember Joseph, and he looked upon the Israelites as a potential threat and enslaved them, making their life very bitter. We all know the story that Pharaoh instructed the midwives to kill all the male children born to Israelites women, and how Moses' mother put Moses in a wicker basket, which is found by Pharaoh's daughter, and then he is raised by Egyptian royalty. In reading this, I wondered, what did Pharaoh think about the fact that without having any male children coming of age, who would build the pyramids, who would build the various structures in Egypt? No discussion is made of Pharaoh's thinking. Also, yesterday I was reading the Jewish Journal, and each week there's a rabbi who talks about that week's portion in the Jewish Journal. And the rabbi that wrote yesterday, I disagree with. He wrote that the theme of this week's portion is anti-Semitism. I disagree with that because my opinion is that whoever was enslaved in Egypt at the time, it could have been Greeks, it could have been Phoenicians, it could have been Ethiopians, whatever, Pharaoh would have been concerned that they would rise up against him, and not just because they were Hebrews did he enslave them. Anyway, Moses witnesses an Egyptian beating an Israelite, and he kills the Egyptian, and then he exiles himself to Midian. When in Midian, he is married, he has a son. And also when in Midian, God appears to Moses in a burning bush. The rabbi explained last night why Moses was the one that God appeared to, and the explanation was that Moses was the only person that actually walked toward the bush, that other people just walked by, but that Moses noticed that the bush was not being consumed when it was burning. God tells Moses that he is going to be the leader of the Israelites out of slavery. Moses protests, and Aaron, his brother, is appointed his spokesman. Moses then returns to Egypt. Moses did not want to be the leader because he had a speech impediment. According to the Midrash, as a very young lad, Moses was once seen throwing Pharaoh's gold crown to the ground. Upon learning of the apparent act of insolence, Pharaoh devised a test to see if the child understood the implications of his actions. He therefore commanded that a platter with a piece of gold and a glowing piece of coal be brought before Moses, and ordered the little boy to choose one. If Moses were to choose the gold, it would imply that he understood the value and therefore would be killed. On the other hand, if Moses chose the burning coal, he would be spared, since he was able to differentiate between gold and a glowing piece of coal. Moses began to reach for the gold when an angel pushed his hand aside and he grabbed the coal instead. Moses then immediately put his hand in his mouth, but that burned his lips and his tongue, and he had a permanent speech impediment as a consequence. One commentator states that the Israelites are the people of the dream, and like a phoenix, we defeat our enemies by rising from the ashes again and again. The dream is that we live in peace in the Holy Land, with God as our King and the Messiah as our leader. Keep this dream in mind when you view the current events in the Middle East. Another commentator asks, where were the people who did speak the truth against the power of the Egyptians? In other words, where were the consumers who demanded that the Egyptian products be free from slave labor, sort of like what you hear a lot today? Most Egyptians did not think twice about the morality of slave labor or child labor. How do we, children and grandchildren of the post-Holocaust generation and descendants of Egyptian slaves, respond to the current events where genocide is taking place? One such place is the Congo. We can respond with respect to the Congo, but we do not. Rabbi Harold Schulweis says that to be Jewish is to care for the world. If this is so, then we should respond to the potential genocide in the Congo by not purchasing anything made with minerals from the Congo. However, we do not. We purchase many electronics that have as their source minerals from the Congo. Finally, it's important to note that women play a major role in the exodus from Egypt. As the rabbi explained before me, Moses' mother and Moses' sister Miriam watched Moses while he was in the river and allowed Moses to be found by Pharaoh's daughter. Again, a woman, Pharaoh's daughter, raises Moses to adulthood. On their return from Midian, without Moses' wife Zipporah's quick thinking, Moses would have been killed at his encounter with the angel of God. However, Zipporah's quick thinking and the circumcision of Moses' son caused God to leave Moses alone. I suggest you read the Etz Chaim, the book in front of you, if you have some time, and ask yourself, why did God choose Moses? There are many answers, one of which the rabbi gave last night, and you may be surprised at the conclusion you'd reach. Also, not to be political, but think, would Moses have been a Republican or a Democrat? He freed the slaves, and yet he provided for all the people every day. Think about his actions not only in the Exodus from Egypt, but also later when wandering 40 years in the desert. I would be interested in your conclusion. Somehow I think your conclusion would depend on your personal political leanings. I look forward to being Darshan again in the future. Thank you.